Welcome to This Explainer. Imagine this nightmare scenario for a second. You've just shipped hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of your company's product across the globe. You're tracking the vessel, you get the notification that it has safely docked, and you finally breathe a sigh of relief. But then, you get the phone call. Your containers have been opened and a massive portion of your expensive international shipment is completely destroyed. We're talking waterlogged, crushed, totally unsalvageable. Panic immediately sets in, because the big question is, who's actually going to pay for this? Okay, let's dive right into this. Picture this specific case study. You're shipping 500 boxes of high-end electronics from Mumbai to Rotterdam. The container lands, the doors swing open, and half your goods are just crushed and soaking wet. You immediately call up your freight forwarder, fully expecting them to make it right. But instead, they give you the cold shoulder. They say, hey, not our problem. Check your bill of lading. And just like that, you're thrust into the notoriously complex world of international maritime claims, trying to figure out if your business is about to take a massive financial hit. And look, we're not talking about some tiny niche issue here. Around 95% of India's international trade volume moves by sea. Why? Because for those massive, heavy bulk shipments, air freight is just straight up impossible. That means almost every single exporter out there faces this exact risk every single time a ship leaves the port. The stakes are absolutely monumental, which is exactly why understanding the legal safety net, or, the lack thereof, is absolutely crucial for your business's survival.
Now, maritime law definitely has a reputation for being super dense, but don't worry, we're going to break it all down in depth today. Our agenda covers the cargo damage nightmare, the new 2025 shipping law, the three-step liability test, the clean bill of lading, calculating the liability cap, and finally, crucial exceptions to know.
Section 1, the cargo damage nightmare. Let's go back to our concrete Mumbai to Rotterdam case study. Out of your 500 boxes of electronics, 80 have arrived completely waterlogged. When your freight forwarder tells you to check your bill of lading, they really aren't just brushing you off. They're pointing you to the single most important document in international trade. Every single shipment runs on the bill of lading. It's the official receipt a carrier gives a shipper when goods are loaded onto a ship. And legally speaking, this one piece of paper is the absolute key to figuring out exactly who is on the hook for those 80 waterlogged boxes.
Section 2, the new 2025 shipping law.
So there's been this recent absolutely critical statutory shift in India that fundamentally changes how these disputes are handled. And shockingly, most exporters still don't even know about it yet. On September 10, 2025, India completely repealed its century-old Carriage of Goods by Sea Act of 1925. That old law? It relied on the 1924 Hague Rules, which were written long before modern shipping containers even existed, so obviously they were incredibly patchy and outdated for modern global trade. In its place, India enacted the Consolidated Carriage of Goods by Sea Act 2025. This new framework runs on the updated, internationally recognized Hague-Visby rules. I know it sounds highly technical, but it's actually incredibly practical. We're going to cover it in depth because it's literally the modern rulebook that dictates exactly who pays when things go wrong.
So the absolutely crucial point here is the date. Act number 19 of 2025 officially commenced on September 10th, 2025. Why does this matter to you right this second? Well, if your cargo was loaded onto a vessel after this specific date, your claims process has completely fundamentally changed. You are no longer operating under those old patchy rules. Every new shipment and every single new claim for damaged goods is now strictly governed by this 2025 Act.
Section 3, the three-step liability test. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the core hidden mechanics of the new law. It's not just a flat rule of, the carrier always pays or the shipper always loses. Instead, cargo damage claims actually run on a very strict fixed sequence, a three-step burden of proof. It's kind of like a high-stakes game of ping pong. Step 1, the ball is in your court. As the shipper, you have to prove that the goods were shipped in perfect condition but arrived damaged. If you successfully do that, boom, the burden of proof bounces over the net for step 2. The carrier now has to prove that the damage falls under a legally recognized excuse. But wait, it doesn't end there. The burden bounces right back to you for step 3. Because even if the carrier proves they had a valid excuse, you can still win the entire claim if you can prove they were negligent.
Let's apply this ping pong match back to our Rotterdam case study. Under step 2, the carrier isn't just going to gladly hand over a check. No way. They're going to try to claim one of the valid legal excuses, like a severe storm at sea, an act of God. Or maybe they'll even try to claim your electronics had an inherent flaw, like poorly manufactured batteries that just corroded all on their own. They might say, hey, there was a massive typhoon. That's why the 80 boxes are waterlogged.
But remember step 3. The ball bounces back to you. If you can prove that, yeah, sure, there was a storm, but the carrier negligently failed to maintain a leaking cargo hold, well, their excuse is totally invalidated, and you win the claim. Section 4. The clean bill of lading.
Of course, before we even worry about typhoons and leaking holds, you have to win step 1. You have to prove the goods were perfectly fine when you handed them over in Mumbai. You do this through something the courts call prima facie proof. Let's translate that heavy legal jargon into plain English, shall we? Prima facie simply means on its face. It is proof that stands as absolute truth in a court of law, unless the opposing side, the carrier, can definitively disprove it. It's incredibly powerful evidence. And what document provides this magical prima facie proof for your cargo?
A clean bill of lading. It's exactly what it sounds like. When your goods are loaded onto the ship, the carrier inspects them. If they don't note any dents, leaks, or damage on the paperwork, they issue a clean bill of lading. This right here is the golden rule of cargo claims. If your bill of lading is marked clean, you have automatically and successfully met step 1. The burden of proof is instantly, forcefully shifted off your shoulders and straight onto the carrier. They cannot go back later and claim the boxes were already wet in Mumbai. The clean bill of lading proves they weren't.
Section 5. Calculating the liability cap.
So you've got your clean bill of lading, and you've successfully proven the carrier is liable for your 80 waterlogged boxes. Now for the million-dollar question. How much money can you actually get back? Well, we need to look at this in depth because the 2025 Act relies on a very specific dual metric formula to cap a carrier's financial liability. Your maximum recovery is tied to something called special drawing rights, or SDRs. An SDR is essentially an international reserve asset created by the IMF. It's a basket of currencies designed specifically to prevent a single nation's economic crash from ruining international trade values. Under the new law, the carrier's liability is strictly capped at either 666.67 SDRs per package or 2 SDRs per kilogram of gross weight of the damaged goods, whichever number ends up being higher. Now to ground that abstract SDR concept in real, actual money. At current IMF valuation rates, an SDR fluctuates around $1.35. That means the cap of 666.67 SDRs translates to roughly $900 per package. So for your 80 water-logged boxes of high-end electronics, unless they are incredibly heavy, which would make the per kilogram rule higher, the carrier's maximum legal liability is capped at around $900 a box. If there were, say, $5,000 worth of electronics in each of those boxes, while you can clearly see how devastating this aggressively low cap can be for modern, high-value goods.
But, and this is a massive but, you aren't always hopelessly tracked by this cap. There are actually 2 ways this limit falls away entirely. First, if you proactively declare the actual higher value of your electronics on the bill of lading before shipping, the cap just doesn't apply. Second, if you can prove the carrier acted recklessly, meaning they caused the damage with intent or recklessly knowing that damage would probably result, this financial limit shatters entirely. If you prove that, they are on the hook for the full actual value of your loss.
Section 6. Crucial exceptions to know. Now, before you go assuming this new 2025 law protects your every move, you really need to understand its strict boundaries. This is perhaps the most vital exception for anyone involved in Indian trade. The 2025 Act governs outward cargo only. It explicitly applies to shipments leaving an Indian port, just like our Mumbai to Rotterdam example. If you're doing the reverse, importing goods into India from Europe or Asia, this new Act's tidy little schedule may not automatically apply to you at all. For imports, the laws of the foreign loading port or specific, often super carrier-friendly clauses buried deep in your shipping contract will very likely take over. It's also really important to clarify the historical context here. The whole concept of SDR limits isn't entirely a brand new 2025 invention. India had actually tried to patch some of these modern Hague-Visby-style limits into the old 1925 Act via an amendment way back in 1993. But honestly, it just created a messy, confusing patchwork of rules that required referencing multiple conflicting legal texts, and it caused lawyers to fight over it for years. The true genius and value of the new 2025 Act is that it finally consolidates all of that into one clear, indisputable schedule. It completely cuts out the guesswork of which rules apply to your contract.
So, what's the game plan here? What should you take away from all this? Here is your highly practical, immediate action plan. If you have a damaged shipment out of India that was loaded after September 10, 2025, the very first thing you do is pull your bill of lading. Second, check if it's marked clean. If it is, remember you have the prima facie power. The burden is on the carrier, not you. And finally, always verify the math on the SDR liability cap before you even think about accepting a lowball settlement offer from a freight forwarder. Never sign away a claim without checking these specifics first.
But wait, that leaves us with one incredibly tricky scenario. What if your bill of lading was issued on September 1st under the old 1925 rules, but the ship is out sea and the cargo damage actually occurs or is discovered on September 15th, after the new 2025 Act has commenced? Which law governs your claim? The old messy one or the new consolidated one? It is a serious legal gray area that could easily cost you thousands. If you want to find out exactly how the transition rules handle this exact scenario, make sure to subscribe to catch our next explainer. Thanks so much for joining me today.